Hey, Eric. So let's get started here. We're here to talk about our AI initiatives with Pilot City, and this will serve as context and training and content for our alumni team members, essentially, who are approved to work on AI projects for us. And I will share that I was able to get as far as I would like in the thinking around it. So we may go through some things in the conversation itself around this like AI project options, basically for alumni team members. But let's go ahead and kick it off first by sharing that you were actually the first person to develop the first lines of code of pilotc.com. So tell us about that. Tell us about, I think people actually don't always know that you were the first person to develop our first lines of code. And essentially because of that, you essentially technically represent the vision of Pilot City, right? Where we want the product of our programs to develop our product, right? So tell us about what that means to you, or if that even matters, and what was it like, when we first when I first approached you about, developing platform, and kind of how you see the platform, how you see Pilot City from that eyes and that point of view.
I mean, it was definitely an adventure, I would say. We didn't really have a clear vision of what we were even working on. And I think when we first started really getting into the code, I think I was living at 42, right? So yeah, that was a whole thing. I think I pulled like 5, 6, 7 all-nighters.
You were at 42 at that time? Like you were in that program?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were
both there, right?
Yeah, I remember Romney was part of it too.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. So you were actually literally, that's right, because they had dormitories, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I think I'm pretty sure I was living there at the time. So I was like living there for a month, and during that same month is when I was.
Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot about the 42 thing. Yeah, such an interesting program or place. It closed down, you know that, right?
Yeah, I know. I heard about it. It was sad.
Yeah.
It was pretty fun. I got to meet a lot of interesting people there. People were traveling there from all over the world, so like a lot of different perspectives. But yeah, during that time, we were really just trying to figure out what we were doing, and we built out our first, I guess, MVP of the product. And I don't even think I've worked on web development or to any like significant extent before that. So it was like a lot of like learning on the fly.
Yeah, I think, it's really cool to hear these stories, because this is like what Pilot City is all about, right? Like, I don't know if you remember Christmas colors, but Christmas colors, I think, is the trauma that I feel like we still
the
feel.
Christmas colors.
Yeah. So just to give some context for the people who are listening. So our first version of our software, we developed and launched and deployed. And when users were using it, we were using all these Pilot City colors, right? Green and pink and red, and for these different kind of chips and buttons and stuff. And the data would get so mixed up in the database that it started creating like shimmering different Pilot City colors for different like chips and buttons and stuff. Literally just because
the specific issue I think was we had a bunch of WebSockets turned on because we wanted the website to be like, live and people could collaborate, but we weren't properly handling the WebSockets. So they got like crossed, and then the site just started flickering. Like you could see pictures and colors changing all over the place. It looked cool. It was really bad.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, this is to the day still how I feel about, I don't know even what it is, but it's a mixture of kind of like our software, our product, our alumni, this mission of trying to have our alumni be the first people that develop in R&D, the first things that we have, and then have them run it. I mean, that itself is a journey. And obviously it is not good that there was Christmas colors going on in our platform, but also it's funny and it builds culture and character in our company. And it's still a proud point that we have, right, with our platform, to be able to reference you as an alumni of our first pilot of Build Projects to Win Internships, our flagship program, right? By the way, that might be eclipsed by Build Projects to Earn Internships at this point. But, to have you be a pilot of that initial program, and then actually build the product of our program, and being the first success manager too, by the way. You were also the first success manager, and success managers still live to this day. I mean, you represent actually an encapsulation of kind of this mission that we've been on, right? And I mean, tell us what you understand as the Pilot's product when you first started, which I think you just said you don't know what we were doing. And I don't know either because we were still figuring out what the product is, right? So tell us from the point of view of like when you first started the platform, what did you think it was and is, right? And then what do you think it is now and what it is and what we're on a mission to create?
Yeah, I mean, so when I guess when we first started building, I think it kind of just came up and was like, I would think I want to make this, scalable. You want to turn this into an actual platform. And then I think PilotCity was well defined before, we got onto building things in online. And, before that, it was like, it was more or less run programs or programs pretty big, but, run programs in order to make cities better, make your community better. And I think that as a like base point has always been true, but we have been going about, how to really, I guess, bring that to fruition. And we've done that in multiple ways, whether it's through the on through the internships that we offer, whether it's through the events that we have at the gate or whatever, whichever, going into classroom and helping people actually develop things. We've gone through it in multiple different ways, but I think that has always been the same goal. And I think overall, as long as we keep doing that, we'll make progress moving forward. But we have tried multiple different ways. And I think we'll always still be trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So I think how you understood it in the beginning was the same way you understand it now, right? We want to build cities. We want to build communities. You did know that we were building a platform for trying to digitize our in-person manual programs, right? As an initial start. You did actually know, and Gerald knew too, that we are trying to build this platform for programs is where we landed eventually, right? And I think that, yeah, I think that is correct. I don't think that you ever understood it as a ed tech platform only kind of thing. You saw it like the second we found out that we were developing a platform for programs, right?
Yeah.
Which was pretty early, right?
I mean, so our initial conception was this was just supposed to help us run programs that were going to be run in class or whatever. That was the initially how we were planning on doing things. And then COVID hit, right? And then we had this whole swap to now let's make this completely runnable, purely online instead of, hybrid programs. And I think that was a pretty big fundamental shift.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing is that you've always understood it as a general purpose platform for programs and that we were targeting classrooms initially. I think that you saw it and I saw it as well as something that helped in-person activities and programs such as in classroom, which we're still doing by the way. But then when COVID happened, we started designing the platform and programs to be more asynchronous online as opposed to live in person or live, asynchronous, right? And so, yeah, I think I think we have been up to date with each other. I think a lot of other alumni don't know that fact, but I kind of get you mixed up sometimes with what I tell other alumni, but you pretty much you knew it all the way through, right? So, I guess if you were to kind of give a blueprint of, because right now we're on PCV4 Max Pro Plus,
Yeah.
which I think
Sure.
was, I don't know if it was a collaboration of you and Gerald naming that, or if it was just Gerald naming it, but the reason why it's PCV4 Max Pro Plus is because it's really the third one, but it's so awesome that we skipped the third and just went to four,
Yeah.
right?
I
And we
think
added
it's
a plus.
Yeah. I think it's
Right?
because the iPhone did the same thing with like,
Did they? Oh, like
skip,
10?
they skipped a generation, I think. And then we just wanted to be funny.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So that, I think that gives us a little a DNA test of like what our culture is all about, and I was all about. I was like, yeah, that sounds like yes for sure, right? So give us a blueprint of what V1 was, right? Like give us a little tech stack of V1 based on you remember it, right? The repo one, and then why we trashed that and went to repo 2 or version 2, right? And then what it is today from where we skipped V3 and went to V4 Max Pro. Like, can you give us like a quick blueprint of the tech stack, V1, V2, and then V4, basically?
Yeah, if I remember properly, I think originally we were just we didn't even have a back end on the first one, right? there was no backend technology and we were just going straight off of Firebase. And we did that because we had some deadlines to hit. We wanted to onboard our teachers and employers within like a week, and we had, we just really needed to hit it. So we didn't have a backend. We were just running it purely off front end using Firebase, but it really wasn't super scalable. So what we did was we ended up leaving that stack. I think that was also Vue, but I think we originally used Vue because Current recommended it, if I remember properly, because it was easy for newbies to understand. And we wanted to keep things simple since a lot of people we were working with have a lot of web development experience. So yeah, our first stack was just purely, I think, Vue and Firebase. After that, we recognized that, there are a lot of issues here. One of the things being like we're hooking directly into Firebase and we're seeing Christmas colors happen, right? Because there's no easy way to manage the webhooks or the WebSockets. So it caused issues like Christmas colors. Then we moved on to the next version. And I think the next version, that's when we went to MongoDB, right? That's when we did the swap from Firebase over to MongoDB. And then we started including a backend and backend services. That's when we started using serverless, right? And we also started using Vue composable, because before that we were on the old Vue stack. Whereas the new one, we started using composable sequences, which is more up to date. It's that way. It's because Vue composable is still used today, whereas how we use it in the first stack isn't even supported anymore.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blur actually, but I think if I were to kind of answer that question, I think I remember V1 being Firebase, and I think just straight up HTML CSS was just raw JavaScript. I don't even think we used Vue at that point as a front end framework.
I remember we used Bootstrap for a minute.
I think that could be right, because I don't think we used Vue in V1. It was just literally like Firebase and the Bootstrap thing, right? A framework. And then I think V2, I don't even know what that was, to be honest.
V2 was when we did was that the one with the Google Maps integration that Hakura helped build?
I think that's probably right. And so I remember V1 being this, I remember designing V1. Okay. I remember V1 being like, I designed on Photoshop. Like I made the designs on Photoshop and I did it in like 2 days. And I was like, this is our blueprint. Right? And we built it, right? I remember that being definitively what I remember. V2 was actually the experimentation around the step-by-step activities. Remember that?
That sounds right.
And we were going to build the step-by-step activities experiment, right? And that's what we have now, by the way, which is kind of crazy. And that's what it was. But then we said, okay, cool. This step-by-step activity thing is working well. I forgot what we built it on. Probably Firebase and maybe some other things, right? I think it was still on Firebase, to be honest. And then what we did was then say, okay, this step-by-step activities thing is working well, but we need to go to a more robust backend. That's when we started planning for V3/V Max Pro, right? And that's when we started making decisions around MongoDB, the Vue front-end framework, and all these other kind of back-end bells and whistles, and front-end bells and whistles, Vuetify, and all that stuff. Is that tracking?
That sounds about right. I think I do remember using Bootstrap for a minute there, and I do also remember messing with some like plain JavaScript. That was with Harvey Mutt, by the way. I think when we were using plain JavaScript.
Oh man, they hated that project. They hated our clinic project because it was so basic, and they just wanted to work on like natural language processing and AI. And if I were to look back at it, I definitely regret not utilizing them for R&D purposes, because it would have been helpful to advance where we'd be today, right? So, but we just needed front end help, right? And needed to like build an app first, right? That was like priority 0, basically. So let's kind of fast forward just a little bit here. So the thing that comes to my mind I want to talk about is the kind of, just tell us about the vision that you've always understood about PilotCity. Do you remember that big Miro map I created, which had a bunch of like features? Like it kind of envisioned the full thing of what we understand now: the portfolio, the wallet, the step-by-step activities, the ability to create programs, to manage programs. Like, do you remember that big map? Like, if you do, like, tell us about how, again, this is kind of elaborating on what you already answered, but like what has been pretty consistent with our products since we first initiated that kind of big vision, like what have you seen that you're kind of like interesting that we still actually are doing this, right? And we're still betting on this product. Like, tell us, I guess, about the product vision that you see in your head and what you've seen to be consistent or you've seen to work well. I'm not really sure if I even have a question for that, but just riff on that a little bit.
Uh, well, I mean, I guess the thing that has been really interesting is how much our employers have really stuck with us. Because I know we still have a lot of like the base employers that we've had from way back in the beginning, like Seed working with us, right? I think our offering towards employers has been, I don't know if it's been consistent, right? Because our product outcomes, I think, are always kind of varying dependent on the programs. So the employers can kind of see different things coming out of them, right? Like there's not, it's too, I don't know if there's a super consistent outcome that they've been getting from us, but they seem to really like to partner with us, right? So I think that means that there is something we have been, uh, I guess, doing properly, whether it's like, I guess, getting people interested in their products or developing things that they think are interesting. So yeah, I think that portion in particular is pretty cool just because I don't see it as I guess because I don't quite see a consistent outcome, there are variable outcomes, but the employer still seems to be happy with what we provide.
Yeah, it's interesting for you to bring up that point, and that's the core of it, right? It's like I see it always as two things. Like what you're addressing is to me is the use case, right? Like the use case of our platform and our software is that we create programs and there's outcomes from those programs. In this case, employers are almost like sponsors or creators of programs, is how I would say it now, right? And then they're very interested in the participants and what they produce as outcomes, such as projects, right? And so you've seen, like, you're kind of fascinated by like how much some of our kind of initial employers still stick around because they've seen good participant outcomes or are generating interesting participant projects, right?
I mean, like when employer or not employers, when students or teachers or schools stick with us, we can provide a very like set deliverables to them, right? A set of deliverables to them and what they're getting. When it comes to employers, the deliverables I think are very variable, right? Like that is probably the most variable portion of the pyramid of the triangle. But they seem to be very happy because they're sticking with us for so long, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I think it is interesting too. It's like Seed is actually in our program this
Yeah.
summer, right? And I'm in touch with the CEO more directly now. And by the way, Eric was a Seed intern, right? In our second Build Projects to Win Internships program. So you've kind of had some direct experience on the second level there too. So Eric, let's transition into let's talk about the product vision a little bit more, but then kind of set up the conversation for the AI thing. Okay. So, how I understand the product, and I'm not going to try to explain it all in one big nutshell, but the whole idea of PilotCity is how do we change and deliver outcomes in society, in particularly cities, communities? How do we make an impact in cities and communities? Right. That's the big question because, the whole story about coming back to San Leandro and wanting to build the city of the future, that kind of thing, right? And then we said, okay, in order to do that, we need to deliver outcomes. How do we get to outcomes? Well, we need to deliver programs, right? That's the word that we ended up landing on, is like programs. Well, how do we deliver programs? Well, we need to do all these program management things, right? Program, setup things, program, you know, stuff, right? And so we started whipping up this kind of product vision of creating programs, managing programs, delivering programs through the step-by-step activities that people now experience when they're a participant. And now this new concept of program sponsorship too, right? So I think you understand the same thing I understand, but just I want to like have you kind of maybe state it from your own words. Like, what do you understand as the general purpose, software product of programs in your head? Like, what is it in your head? I have my own vision, and it's been really honestly kind of hard to communicate that to everyone and have them understand. But how do you understand it? Because I feel like you're the one that understands it the most, right? But also understands it from a practical user point of view, right? Like when you talk about employers too. So give us a definition of what you see as the product in your head, at the highest
Well,
level.
I mean, you have to think about like the people that we're supporting. We're supporting, I guess, primarily. I mean, we want this to be vague, variable, right? We want to be able to support a wide range of people and open this to be more general. That's the overall goal. But in terms of how we're operating it right now, the general product vision is to be able to support the outcomes that students want, that teachers want, schools want, and what the employer want. So a student wants to learn new skills. A teacher wants to be able to say that a student learned this specific set of skills and fulfilled this criteria, right? Because that helps with getting schools funding. And with employers, like I said before, a little bit more variable. Typically, it's about product engagement. So those are the three things that we typically want to deliver on. And I guess in this case, our programs are built in a way that allows everyone to get what they want. So we have a set number of unlockable opportunities that help us to verify that students are able to learn a certain number of skills, that they're able to fulfill a certain number of criteria, and are able to get a strong amount of product engagement. That's the overall goal of a program. And the case of when we work with schools, right? That's a primary goal. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that hits it on a general level. Yeah, how I would translate some of the stuff you're saying into I think this is where it's kind of difficult to communicate kind of what I see in my brain, and maybe that's actually a good thing, because if it's that hard to understand but it's so clear in my brain, that actually might be good for us as a company, because that means not many people can figure out what we're trying to do, which is good, because I think it's a big idea. But the whole idea is like when you said students, right? To me, right now, they're participants, right?
Yeah, you can
On
make
our
it more
platform.
general.
Yeah. And then like teachers in schools, like they are creators and sponsors, right? And then employers are kind of like more sponsors, but can be creators too. And you have like parents, which are kind of like just sponsors or some kind of sidebar gray area thing, like stakeholder, right? And if we can just see work-based learning programs as like one vertical of programs that we have on our horizontal platform of programs, then I think now we're talking, right? And then the vision is now, hopefully and ideally we can start kind of going to other areas of programs, right? From not just early workforce development programs like what we're doing right now called work-based learning for schools, but then to workforce development programs for like city governments and county governments, and then maybe economic development programs for city governments, and then maybe even healthcare programs with like your auntie, who's the director of health education at Kaiser, who's also an employer in our program, right? And then kind of go out from there with the different programs, right? So, yeah, anything that you have to share on top of that? Just want to be sure you got all your thoughts out before we move on to the next topic here.
No, I mean, I think that makes sense in trying to explain what the goal is, right? It's to deliver a program with multiple sponsors and make sure that people get what they want out of it.
So let me kind of transition thought here. When you think about these kind of program creation abilities, program management capabilities, these program delivery capabilities, such as the step-by-step activities, the program sponsorship ability that I'm starting to kind of infuse in. And since day one, we reconnected about 6-7 months ago, right? Maybe we should, make that a whole nother episode about kind of your journey of becoming a software engineer since we first met and then up until now, right? Maybe that's a whole nother conversation. But so the product the same way I understand it. You probably understand from more of a grounded point of view, but this whole program creation, management, delivery, sponsorship thing, right? With this portfolio thing, what have you like? And then we like, did you see AI in that since day one? Like, did you see something we needed in terms of a technology to really enable the full vision back in the day in 2018, 2019, 2020?
Yeah, so
Like,
this was when we were trying to run things hybrid, like purely hybrid. We did not try to do full asynchronous at all yet. And you asked to make it fully asynchronous. I think this was what was missing, right? A way for people to be able to, I guess, get the experience that they get with employers, right? Because our platform, I think, works really well when you build a sense of community and people aren't just kind of lost in the woods. I think that's very easy to happen. So when you talk about using AI, it's a way for people to get their bearings and really figure out what they're trying to do, because our overall, what we want in each program is very variable. And when people have a strong support system and people can see that people are struggling, that's when PilotCity does really well, right? When teachers are able to support students and really help them build out their ideas, that is when we get the best programs. And I think, the idea of trying to move asynchronous was a bit of an issue for me, just because how do you do that fully asynchronously?
Yeah. So I think you summarized it pretty eloquently and really simply, right? We programs are very experiential, right?
Yeah.
And how we started our programs was in classroom, in person, at the gate, at the bank, at the whatever.
Yeah.
And we're trying to build software to kind of match that vibe. And we attempted to do it, and we did do it, and we still are using classrooms, and it's still used to manage, these different elements, right? But there was always this missing sauce that we needed to kind of manage the whole asynchronous online thing, right? To really power it through, and to have this thing that's repeatable that didn't need a human at all. And we didn't really say AI back in 2018, 2019, 2020 when we were building this thing, but I think
Yeah.
now that we're here, I realize that this is the technology that we've been waiting for to actually liven program management, program delivery, and program creation, right?
Yeah. I mean, so previously we ran them in the classroom, right? You were there to help the students out, to help the teachers out with running the programs. So ideally, the goal would be to have a you that's there everywhere at all times, capable of helping students and grounding them, and helping them to move through the project, or helping the teachers to be able to create the projects and align the goals with what the employers, with the district wants, right? That's the overall goal of having an AI, right? Having somebody that's always there, capable of helping.
Yeah. And I think this is where this initiative that we're doing with alumni team members to do R&D focused on AI is really important and actually very fair. I wish we claimed it earlier and did R&D on it earlier, but really it was too early. We had too much stuff to going on anyways. It didn't really was relevant. But now that it's here, this is like really our time to really bring it into the platform and into the stack. So let me share a couple of things. Actually, let me share my screen and actually show a couple of things because it's kind of popping up and I want to give some kind of like visual for people. And then I'd like to talk about the details here, okay, in a second. But based on what we just talked about, right? Like this is basically the gist of like, okay, this is an activity type matrix that I created. And this is what our platform is looking to achieve in terms of types of programs, right? Basically, what you were talking about earlier is the yellow one, right? How do we get to yellow, right? How do we get to asynchronous online where it doesn't even require, like, it's just fully autonomous and people are supported without any human, right? And, where we started was actually this kind of purple synchronous in person thing, right? Where we had employers literally go into classrooms period by period and engage classrooms and do mini hackathons, right? To generate project ideas, right? That's actually where we started, which is nuts, right? And I don't know if I would go back to that point of view, but this is why we want to go to kind of yellow, right? Is that we want to have a spectrum and we want software to manage this whole spectrum of activities and programs, right? So I think that that's kind of where we're at. And then asynchronous, onlines are basically like live meetings with employers on a weekly meeting, for example, right? So I just want to give a baseline here to kind of acknowledge what you're saying. And another thing I want to share is that, I think in a very simple way, this is almost like, unleashing our sauce here, but the whole idea here, I think, is to be able to create programs so that way we can have programs that people can be a part of here, so the participants can join it, and then sponsors can sponsor those people. This is really what we're looking to create, right? In a simple nutshell. So just wanted to kind of give a quick peek at that as well. And I think, and then there's the portfolio at the end here, and maybe some community involved here and so forth. So, I think when we're talking about our platform, I think it's a very specific niche vision that has an explosive potential. Maybe I'm just convinced myself, and I think that because I'm biased. I do think a lot of people see the same magic of what we're creating. Like I have teachers say, "Oh, this is a very interesting idea," but they understand the use case vision. They don't really understand the general purpose vision, right? So I think there's interesting ideas that we have. I think we're trying to do something really big. We haven't gotten to that product vision yet. Maybe that's what's limiting our growth. There's a lot of questions that we're asking ourselves, right? You kind of know the steps that we've taken all the way through, right? And now we're at this point where AI is at top of mind for everyone. And for us, we're realizing that AI is a enlivening system for our platform, right? And now we want to kind of approach it from that way. So let's kind of get into it. So when you think about let's start with what you're building as a foundation for AI, okay, for our platform. And then let's talk about maybe what else we can build right after that. So what are you building right now with the AI initiative? How have you been thinking about it? What are you framing out? Like if we're building the AI, if we're building our platform out, where's AI in the house? Is it the foundation? What's the infrastructure? How are you approaching building it? Give people a layout of the tech stack that you're creating, just so people have context of what they can think of and how to build on top of it, kind of thing. So let's start there, and then we'll talk about program creation as a use case.
Sure. I mean, when you think about AI, I still think that you shouldn't think of it as a means. You should think of it as a tool, right? It's a tool to accomplish means. You shouldn't think about using AI just for the sake of using it. There should always be some sort of thing that you're trying to accomplish. In our particular case, what we want to do is we want to be able to use AI to be able to, I guess this ties into what I said earlier about the pyramid, right? With the three things that people want, whether it's goals, whether it's outcomes, whether it's, certain set of criteria they have to fulfill. We're trying to use AI right now to simplify that system, right? So when people create a program on our platform, we can create a program that hits all three things. It gets what the students want, it gets what the teachers want, and it gets what the employers want. Uh, so we want to be able to help. Typically, teachers are the ones that make our programs, or it's you. But we want to create a system that allows us to brainstorm and really figure out program criteria that hits those marks that we can use to create full programs that run on our platform. That's the initial conception, right, of why we're using AI right now. Did you want me to get into our tech stack at all, or did you just want me to talk
Please.
about?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to get into what are you building as the tech stack? What is the foundation that team members can expect, and how can they build on top of it, essentially?
Yeah. So right now we haven't gotten into using the agent just yet. Right now I've been doing a lot of the preliminary work. When you think about AI, a lot of the preliminary work really goes into feeding it context, right? Because you can just give AI pretty much, if you give AI something bad, it'll spit out something bad. So in order to get it to work properly, you have to be able to feed it good information so I can use that information to give you what you want. In this particular case, what I'm doing is I'm working on the architectural stuff that allows us to feed it good context. So right now we have a big bank of activities, right? The activities that are run on our program. And my goal is to be able to essentially index those activities, right? You want to be able to create a catalog of them so the AI can look through them and pick ones that are relevant to this program based on the project scope, and then create the program from that. So really right now, the foundational layer is making it so that the AI can read what's on our platform. That's the primary goal. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. So and the context that it's reading is quite literally, actual collections of documents, integration of collections of documents. This might be program documents. This may be participation slash what we call internally student documents. This could be activity schema documents, like activity documents. This could be user documents, portfolio documents. It's basically all the foundational kind of content and data of our platform, right? And the people, the programs, the participation instances, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, so in general, like the big field right now in AI is RAG, retrieval augmented generation. So a lot of the base level architectural decisions we're making right now revolve around how do we feed the AI what it needs in order to develop what we want. So we've been going through a bunch of iterations trying to figure out the best way to get the information it needs. And right now we're currently working on activity stuff. But in the future, we can also start working on things like trying to figure out which students are having issues at our platform, uh, and then generating maybe a work recommendations to the teacher on how he can get these students to uh, more efficiently get to the program, stuff like that. And in order to do that, we would need strong observability. So you would need to wait. All this is like, grabbing information that would be useful to the AI so that it can do its thing. It's all about observability and context.
So paint us a roadmap and a milestone set that you see in your head. Right now, you're developing context infrastructure for the AI, right, to read based on our database. What's right after that? What's right after that, do you imagine? And what do you
Yeah.
imagine
So,
even a few steps after that?
okay, sure. So right now we want it to be able to read from our database. That's the first one. Then the next one is probably going to be observability and metrics. So we want to start keeping track of how students are doing, as an example, right? You want to know if students are having issue with particular activities, if they're having issues with understanding what the overall goals are, just stuff like that in general. In order to get that information, we need to log it somewhere. So we need to start gathering metrics on how they're doing. And this information would be really important for the AI as well as for the teacher, right? But once we have that information, then we can start utilizing AI to figure out, oh, why is this program doing so poorly? You could try to figure that out from all the metrics that we have now, right? And then once that's done and we figure out why programs are doing poorly and what those metrics are, we can do the same thing on the other end. How can we make programs really good? Because now we have more information about what makes them bad. We can do the same thing on the opposite end, and we can upgrade our AI, right? Our agent over time using this feedback loop to become better and better based on the metrics that we observe.
So let me repeat what you're saying, and let me try to overlay some words that I'm trying to figure out how it folds into. So what you just said was number one, we need the ability for the AI to read our database. So be able to read and understand the context. Number two, we need observability of the participants in programs and how they're doing and be able to log those things and even make actions from those things, such as, hey, this participant not doing really good. Let's log that and then line up a message to send to them, for example, to kind of remind them or help to see if they need help kind of thing, right? So it's kind of like some data analytics, right? And then actions from the data analytics, right?
Yeah,
Is kind of what I'm
that's
hearing
the
from
overall
you.
goal.
Yep. And then what I'm hearing after that is, okay, once we have that going, then we can start to understand what programs are good and not good, or could improve, or could get even better, right? Or
Yeah.
which ones
So
we
the
should
goal
just
is to
retire.
the goal would be to create uh, create actionable insight, right? Once we have metrics, then we can figure out what actions can be taken in order to improve someone's experience. So, like, say, for example, someone is doing really poorly, maybe we have the AI reach out and try to figure out, what's going on? Why are you spending an hour or two on this particular activity? And being able to, and, once it helps them out, maybe even provide some insight to the teacher and let them know that this person was having this issue. They let me know that this was going here are some actions that you could take on your end, and here's what has already been done. And that would help that student to get through the program and allow us to figure out, what's wrong with this program in particular, and really just try to make it a more positive experience for everyone.
Right. So it does sound like there's, use cases around communications, reminding, success management, and those things in it. So let's take those layers, right? You just mentioned context and reading, data analytics, and actionable insight making. It's really those two main layers, I guess, right? There might be a third layer that might be getting wrong, but let's just call those two buckets, right? Reading and understanding our database for the AI, and then number two, like making actions based on it, right? That seems to be the two buckets I'm hearing. How would you map the products and the features that we have to those two layers? Like, for example, the program creation ability, like how does that map to this two layers? How does the program management product and features layer to these two elements? And how does the program delivery, right, the step-by-step activities, for example, even the SMS idea that we have to mirror the step-by-step activities, and even the program sponsorship stuff, like how do you see, is that two different axes,
Well, I think any deliverable that we make that includes AI has both layers, right? It's not just one or the other.
Right. So I think that's the short answer to the question, right? You're basically saying, like, we can see it almost as two axes, I guess. So there's program, like there's program creation as a vertical stack of things we want to get accomplished, have capability to do for our users. We want program management, and we want program delivery, and we want program sponsorship. And you're saying across both of those, we need to have the ability to read the data across those features, and then also make actionable insights in addition to that. That's
Yeah,
basically what you're saying, right?
yeah, and I would say like the program creation does both. It grabs information that's important to all users and then tries to create a program that fits all those needs. And if you were to talk about the program management aspect as well, it's doing the same thing, trying to figure out where the pain points are and trying to alleviate those would be the goal of that.
Right. So if I were to just get to a point where, let me actually share my screen here so I can do a quick live visual for people to understand. Because I think this is actually where the products will derive, Eric. So let's take a look at it real quick. So what I'm seeing is reading context, actionable insights. Maybe we name it differently, and I'm not naming that correctly. But what I'm seeing basically here
Or you can do like an XY.
yeah, it's kind of like this thing going on, right? Let me drive this to the top. So basically, this is creation of programs, right? And then so forth and so on for the next ones, right? Creation, management, delivery, and let's just call it sponsorship because, again, this may not be meeting all this directly, but that's so. With this kind of drawn here, is that what you see in your head with what the roadmap is? And right now, what we're doing, like right now, what we're literally doing, right, is this program creation layer, from my understanding, right? Like this is kind of what we're doing right now, right? This red box. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, essentially. We haven't gotten to the action portion, but right now we're just trying to get into read what's going on, give it good context.
Yeah, and so this is where we're trying to find out like how we read activities, for example, how we read programs, right? How we read participant instances, right? And I mean, what are you expecting here again? Like, I guess what are you expecting us to be able to do once? Like, and is this the direction, right? So is this like number one?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so the main goal right now is to be able to get the AI to be able to read the activities that we have, just so it can select the proper ones and create a program that matches, the program scope that people would want. So I guess the second portion there would be the actual creation of the program, being able to suggest and fill out activities for programs that match a particular program scope.
Right. So designing programs, setting up those programs, right? For the most part, at least.
Yeah.
Okay. So and this is what generally you're going to keep working on and take care of for the most part, right? From my understanding. Or that's what the mission is initially for us, is to really get to
Yeah.
this step. But in order to get to this step, we need this step, right? So that's kind of what
Yeah.
you're doing still, right?
Yeah.
So kind of moving on now, like would you say the next best place we should be at is here? Like this is obviously what I'd assume would be the next one, right? Or are you thinking here or here or here or here? I'm curious to know, like, what
Yeah.
do you
So
see as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
yeah. So the next portion would probably be metrics and deliverability, because that's the context that's important when it comes to program management, right? Figuring out how students are doing, how people are doing in their programs, and how you can help them. That would be the goal for management.
So really, this is number 3, right?
Yeah.
And I guess my question for you is, you plan to probably do this part, I'm assuming, right? Like I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so obviously this is probably number 4, right? But you tell me if I'm wrong, and then maybe this is number 5, and maybe this is number 6, right? I don't know if that's what you see sequentially in your head, but that's kind of what my brain would kind of go towards, right? As an idea.
Sure. Yeah. So right now it's kind of fuzzy after management. But sure, that works.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is what is the goal that we have? So given they know kind of the problem areas now, what is the goal of for our alumni team members who are researching and R&D AI for us? Where should they play, right? And where should they focus? And should they all focus in one area? Should we say, hey, this is option A, this is option B, this is option, C, whatever, right? Or is it more like, hey, all the options are in here and you should play in here, right? Because I think last time I talked to you one-on-one, you basically suggested that alumni team members should probably play right here, right? Where they basically create a crew AI is what I think I heard you said,
Oh
and
yeah,
create
deliverable
kind of these
pipelines.
like make some activity instructions, activity support, like activity agents, basically, right?
Yeah.
So tell us more. Like, where do you think, like, how would you kind of slice and dice where alumni team members do AI research for us this summer? Like, and let's just elaborate on that.
Uh, yeah. So I mean, in my head, I think it's typically better or easier for people to get started when they don't have to know all of the context about how our tech stack works. So if you give them a smaller piece of the pie and just have them solve that, then we can utilize what they did in the future when we start developing new pipelines. So, like, say for example, let me see here. I think I forgot what the example I gave you was, but we wanted them to be able to create, I think, agent pipelines that help them out with certain activities. Right? That was the example I gave you previously. We can that is still deliverable. I think that is valid. So, like, for any problem activities, like maybe research, as just one example, right? Uh, and then you can create like a crew AI pipeline that allows the student to be able to um, check all plausible sources. Sources are dependent on what the program scope is, so that can be variable. Like, say, for example, you want to focus purely on research papers and Wikipedia is not allowed. Then that affects what the pipeline would look like. So there's a large context to the pipeline, but uh, it's all scoped down to just be within the activity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that helps a lot as one thing that people can work on. And I think there are probably. Do you know of any activities like off the top of your head that a lot of people have issues with
Yeah,
that are not
I
completed?
think Ideate is a really good example because people need help thinking of ideas, right? And they want to know if their idea is good, right, before they begin. So I think
Mhm.
that's one example, and it's more basic as well. It's just strings of text, right?
Yeah. So that's a very open question. Is this idea good?
Right.
Uh, like you can answer that very simply, or you can try to do some research and try to figure out if it's actually good. Like, say, for example, you can include in your AI pipeline to do research around other companies that provide the same idea. You know, there's a very large context of things that you can do. You can also evaluate maybe for ones that have a more business aspect, like is this a proper business plan? Like, is it scalable? Stuff like that. Uh, and it's very there's a large pipeline of things that you can account for when you build that type of thing. And this feedback, I would say, is there in the classroom, but it's not there when people work on this asynchronously by themselves. And I think focusing AI projects around those particular pain points would help people a lot, especially when they don't quite know what they're doing, and the teacher isn't even there to help them out.
So let's make it more tangible so I can understand how we can help our team members basically. So it does look like this box right here is probably what we're talking about if they were to do something tangible and useful and simple, right? Um,
Yeah, then
Number
by
6 here.
yeah, I would say it's better for people that are constrained to like a month because they can only get so far if they only have a month.
Okay, so let me kind of take it step by step here just so I'm getting that straight. So it sounds like really the process in this scenario is like the mission in this case is maybe I should do one of these post-it notes. They can add more data, but the mission seems to be um create a an assistant to help participants complete activities, right?
Sure.
Successfully. That's the mission, right?
Yeah.
And to do that, um, there's all these activities, right? There's ideate, there's pitch, there's demo, there's interview, there's all these different activities, correct?
Yeah.
And this is our activity kind of catalog, if you will, right? So what you're suggesting is that they choose one of these, right? And like, I guess just give us a tangible thing. Like, what do you see as the interface for this, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So if you were to keep building from here, right? If you want an assistant to help with ideate, you would probably have to give it the program scope. You would have to give it any, I guess, the initial prompt, right? What is this person thinking that they want to ideate for? Or what are their initial ideas? And then yeah.
so like, for example, like, let's say they would start typing here, right? Are you saying that it should be something that pops up, like, I guess let's get the interface straight. Like, how do they get help? Is it going to be different for every activity? Do we want to have,
I see.
you know, how are they getting help? Is it assisting them as they're typing? Is it a thing on the bottom right that's kind of like peachy kind of thing, like an assistant helping them saying, hey, that's a cool idea, but like, because
So
it's
I
going to
think
have to
there
be
should be,
scalable across all activities, right? We don't want to build a custom thing for every activity, is what I would assume, right?
um, I think it really, I think if you want to help them through this particular activity, and you can have multiple. So what I'm thinking is, for certain activities, you'd probably want a very clearly defined pipeline for how you want to help them, especially if there are certain goals that you want to accomplish. You have to be very specific, so you'd probably need a singular pipeline for that activity. In general, though, if an activity doesn't have a clear deliverable, then you could probably use a general purpose pipeline. Does that make sense?
And so give us an example of a general purpose pipeline. So let's say, like, what's an example of a clear defined pipeline that you might expect?
Sure. So like something like let's say there's an activity that allows them to link to Discord, for an example, right? Then in that particular case, you probably just want an agent that helps guide them through linking their account to Discord. And that is, you don't need like a crew AI with multiple nodes and multiple workers trying to figure out how to link this to Discord. It's just read these instructions. Does that make sense?
So you're basically saying that the AI model is really just an instructor or facilitator, right? In this case, like, they're almost just kind of reading the instructions, knowing their actions that the user is taking, and then suggesting the next action. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So I think it really depends on the activity, though. So, like, say for example, the IDA activity, for that activity, does the prompt of one affect the prompt on the next, or are they all individual?
They're all individual.
Okay. So for that one in particular, yeah. So in this particular case, what I would probably see is, I guess the AI would act like the way a teacher does, right? It would try to take what the user has written so far and then maybe suggest how to refine that particular context, or maybe give suggestions for the next one. So if somebody has started, putting in examples for the user or customer, then it would ask them to refine that, make it more specific if it's not already. And if they're having issues on problem or opportunity, it would help them to fill that out. Does that make sense?
So let me try to paint out a picture of what's going on in my head. So it sounds like what we need to do, like, if we want to do this activity thing, right? We need our alumni team members to basically, number one, like, pick an activity, right? Pick an activity, right? And then after that, we need to understand, we need the
What
we
the
need them
goals
to,
are, the deliverables of the activity are.
right.
Right.
Well, let me just take a step at a time because I think it will get there. So pick an activity, and then we have to read the inputs, right, from the participant, right? Like, there needs to be some kind of reading of the input. right? Like for example, the ideate, kind of user
You probably,
problem, right?
yeah,
Or statements, or basically we need to understand like what is going on with, like, the user needs to make an action, right? So these are like user actions and inputs, right? I think that's what's going on.
yeah. You
Um,
also probably want to read the project scope.
right. So it also needs to have in the model, like we're literally making a model right now, right? So like this is like the program scope, right? Or project scope, right? So it needs to read this too, right? As well. So you're saying like and then there might be a bunch of other things that we're not thinking of, right?
Yeah,
That comes in as well. So basically you're saying that our alumni should do this part, right? And then once the input is read, then there needs to be some kind of, some kind of prompting of AI, right? Or some kind of understanding of the inputs, right?
yeah.
They need
So
to
I guess
occur.
so. There are two sides of the coin. It'd be one would be evaluating how well that user has done so far on a particular input field, and the other side would be asking for help.
Right. Okay. So evaluating how well they're doing and asking for help. So there's like more of a manual scenario and then more of an automatic kind of
Yeah, I would probably expect the user to. I wouldn't expect the AI to just start filling things out for somebody. You would
right.
want them to like click a button and ask for help.
Right. So this really prompting of really, I guess this is really the evaluation step here is what I'm hearing, right? This is what you're saying, right? This it really just merged is into here, right? So there's some kind of, I guess prompting of AI is really next, right? But
Well, I do think that you should give the user some sort of visual feedback to how well they did on a particular prompt. So I think it should also, that should be a part of the deliverable portion, you know?
yeah, but that's almost like right after. So evaluation then leads to some kind of prompting, right, of AI to generate a response, right? Or displayed output, right? And then what you're saying is what is sent to them, right? So this is basically what participants see, right? This is like how they're doing, right? Some kind of like good, that's in line, right? Or whatever, right? Is what you just said, right? So I think this is almost like the the displayed response, right, to participant. This is kind of like the the kind of the processing of a response, right? Kind of thing. This is the um, understanding of the data and insights is kind of what I'm hearing. And then obviously the one right here is reading, right? Reading
Sure.
inputs, right? And so I guess what you're so how does Crew AI fold into this, right? Like how can this platform help us create solutions for this for a particular activity?
Yeah. So I originally recommended Recruit AI just because it's a very, it's a simple tool that allows you to create solutions for complex problems. It allows you to essentially create multi-stage, multi-worker pipelines to accomplish a task. So, like, you could have a worker that helps with research. You can have a worker that helps with, I guess, like doing math. Like, you have a worker that specializes uh, in finalizing, or I guess, evaluating business models. Right? Workers for all sorts of things that help you to accomplish a singular task.
So I guess in practice, how does Crew AI help us with this workflow? Like, is it going to allow us to kind of do this piece up here?
So it'll be, no, not that portion. So that portion probably needs to be supplied to the Korea model. The
Right, right.
portion that it would be used for is probably after reading inputs. Everything after reading inputs.
Got it.
So
So
you can have
really,
a model that helps you to understand the inputs that are being supplied and how they work within the project scope, for example. And then that model will could tell other agents how to improve a response, as an example.
Got it. Yeah, because green is just the data, our database, right, of
Yeah.
data. So this is our data.
Yeah. Create specifically for creating the pipeline.
Right. And then the reading of the inputs is really this is really kind of our foundation system, right? Reading the inputs,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then
Yeah.
you're basically saying, okay, now that we have all these inputs, it now needs to understand the data and insight, right? It needs to process a response and display it. I mean, the displaying is kind of a bit different, right? So maybe this is not part of it per se, but
Yeah.
it's certainly these two, right?
Yeah. So especially when you want to create a particular deliverable, then create becomes a lot more useful. So like say, for example, you wanted to, I don't know, create a landing page out of using a business concept, right? And that is the goal of this ADK for this activity. Then that's happening on multiple verticals. You have to do some sort of research around this business concept. You need to do some sort of coding. You need to do evaluation around how certain things work, and you could have many different types of agents working together in order to create this particular activity. This is an example, right? I don't think we have any activities this complex, but you can create very complex pipelines using Career AI.
So I think that starts to make sense. So let me just paint an example so it's really clear in my head for alumni team members too. So if we want to do like ideate, right, we have to get the user, problem, innovation, solution kind of inputs first, right? And then we may want to say, okay, I mean, I'm not going to try to create this whole thing because it sounds like it's pretty involved and I think people understand it, but we have to almost like create a specific, like we have to have a goal of what is right and wrong and best for each of these strings of text, right? In relationship to the actual program scope, right? And ideally, I would assume in context of everything else completed, right, as well. So there's it seems like this could get involved. I guess I won't go into it right now, but I think this is exactly why we want them to develop this, right? Is because each and every activity has a different every activity seems to have a different scenario. Is that why you're saying you want alumni team members to work on these projects essentially?
Yeah. So I think in this they can get really complex, right? Especially if you start, you can even integrate other tools if you want to within the Career AI pipeline. You could rather reach out to Google Docs or read to Google Docs, stuff like that. So they can be really, really complex when they build up the pipelines, and you can get a lot of things done with them. Um, and I wanted to have it be scoped to activities in particular because the scope is small; it's easy to figure out. They can create really complex pipelines and get a really good feel for what AI is capable of doing, like right now, without getting like bogged down in our technical stack.
So I think I'm on board with this approach because I was initially thinking that alumni can work on something more broad, but I could see that going nowhere, right? This actually will go somewhere, right? Like, and we can
Yeah,
actually
we can.
use this,
Yeah,
right?
so once they build this, we can include that exact pipeline that they developed directly into our platform. We just move it in, and it's usable for us.
Like, so you're saying that they have to develop on our Crew AI account, and then once it's on there, we can literally just integrate with Crew AI and just use the model. Is that what you're
So I
saying?
don't know if Cray. So when I used Cray previously, it wasn't actually a hosted service. It looks like it might be now.
Okay.
But basically, all Cray is a tool for building pipelines. That's the overall goal of it. When I first used it, it looks like they allow you to run the pipelines themselves. Now you can do either or. We can either host it ourselves or we can host our Cray.
So let me back up a little bit because I want to get a couple of things cleared up before we move forward with the other questions to kind of knock this out because I think we have a good direction here now, and I'm on board with this. There may be exceptions for certain alumni team members based on their interests with what we want them to build, but I think this is a really great starter pack, right? What we need to do. Let me ask you this because this may throw a wrench in our plans here. If we have alumni team members develop a model on Crew AI for participant success of each activity, right? Ideate, pitch, demo, whatever. And we then start creating all these other activities in the future with our AI activity designer, right? It sounds like that isn't the right approach to what we should be creating for. It sounds like what we should be creating for sounds like is more of an abstracted model where they create a crew AI model to support a component or a widget of an activity in relationship to the activity, right? That it's in, as opposed to an activity. Because in the
Yeah. So
future, we may create activities on the fly, right? With components and widgets. So
the
how do you reconcile that? And how would you reframe maybe what the project could be in relationship to that?
Yeah, the thing is, I don't see that having a whole lot of success just because when you create these helper pipelines, they're very specific. They really help you to get through a particular activity. And you're able to create multiple agents that do different tasks in order to get the activity done. I don't think that's super possible right now, given like a random activity, right? You could have a general pipeline that helps people to get through a particular task, but in order to have it be useful, you would have to give it access to, like, as an example, like 40 different agents, because you don't know what it needs. Like maybe one activity doesn't need you to do research. Maybe an activity doesn't need you to do coding. Maybe an activity doesn't need you to do like any sort of things. So in order to create a general purpose pipeline that can work for any activity, you would need these individual tools, and you need to be able to assign it those tools on the fly. So I don't quite think we can do that in a way that would work really well for every activity. I think it's really only works if you specify the activities that we use the most often. And there will always be those activities that we use in like every program,
Yeah, I think I'm tracking. Well, I guess with that said, let's say we do make an agent for each activity in the catalog, right? And let's say we are able to create activities on the fly with different components in the future. I guess we'll have to accept that when we make these activity specific agents, that it's really kind of like a luxury item,
Yeah,
right? That gets
that's a good way of thinking of it.
Yeah, it's a luxury item that are typically used in programs that are foundational, and that's so foundational that we add a bonus to it and it
Yeah,
helps them through.
you'd probably want to include it on anything that has a strong deliverable, right? Like if this deliverable is dependent on uh, like this school getting funding for something in particular, like there's a set of goals they have to meet, and this is a deliverable that gives them that or this is the activity that gives them that deliverable, then we would probably want to include it for that in particular, you know?
So essentially what will happen is we have the activity schema document. That's activity definitions, right? That's the
Yeah,
catalog of activities, right? We're essentially creating agents for each. We're associating it to one of those activities, right? And it kind of can be paired up with it. Some activities may have AI agents that can assist participants, some may not, right? And what we'll do is, if we're able to, okay, this might be kind of interesting because when we think about it, we can make activities on the fly, left and right, right? But maybe that's something that we can automate is designing activities, without anyone developing activities. But maybe what our developers actually do is now making AI agents for these activities. That's almost like the scope of developers now who are developing activities on our platform,
yeah,
which kind of
you can
advances
probably
us a
get
bit
away.
further.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could probably get away using the thing I told you about before, the MCP tools. Uh, you can probably get away with like giving a general agent access to like 20, 30 different tools, and then telling it to help this user with this activity, right? So now this agent knows that this user wants to fill out these fields, has access to this project scope, and has these 20 to 30 tools to choose from down them. That probably works for most activities, but it doesn't work very well for every activity, right? It just helps them get somewhere. It doesn't guarantee that they are generating something that of great value.
Okay. So how would you pave a roadmap of this for the future if we were to, I guess, abstract this so that we can have an activity assistant agent for all activities? Like,
Yeah, so that's what I was just mentioning. You'd give it agent access to a bunch of tools, 20, 30 different tools that you think are the most useful. And it'll use those tools to help a user with fixing something.
Got it. So
Does that make sense?
basically, you would just make an activity, you make a more of a component widget activity agent or component widget agent instead, or tool agent, right?
Sure. So like say, for
You're
example,
helping someone through a string of text, right? You're helping someone through making a YouTube link. You're helping
yeah,
someone through making clicking on a Discord, joining a community button, right? You're helping people through, logging in hours or whatever, right?
sure.
You're
And
helping
then,
them through general purpose
yeah,
tasks, right?
yeah. And then, with each of those individual things, you can probably, if they're set up as, as molecules, then you can probably try to associate a tool with that particular molecule. Like say, for example, a research molecule, right? Then any activity that has this research molecule, you would probably want the agent that's helping with that to be able to conduct research on the web. Just as
Got
an
it. So
example.
got it. So that'll be the evolution of, we'll make it activity specific agents basically for now, but it may eventually be component slash widget slash tool slash input
Yeah, the
slash,
thing is though,
you know,
the very specific activity model that we create to help people will always be better than this general purpose thing that we create.
right. Because those, maybe what we do is we think of it as different levels of agents, right? There's activity agents in the future that are more luxury goods. And then there's like component slash tool slash widget based, assistance in the
Yeah.
future. And maybe there's even program specific models, right? Like build projects to earn internships, right? Should have its own like agent, right? As a model, I would assume. I like that. Okay. I like that framework because then that gives us an idea of like, actually, let me just drive that home and then wrap this conversation up with a couple more Spitfire questions, if you don't mind. So just to wrap this home, this is kind of how I'm thinking about this at this point. And maybe this actually is the framework for how we think about this. So we have activity specific, let's just call it simplicities, activity agents. Okay. That's what we're talking about right now, right? And then I think what we're talking about is kind of like a widget or component kind of agent, which are within activities, right? They're kind of, let me just zoom this out a little bit. I think we're talking about something that's kind of like this, maybe in the future to kind of abstract it a bit more. And then I think what we're talking about at a kind of a larger level is program agents. And this might be, for example, like build projects to earn internships, right? Something like that. And then this is more like ideate, pitch, right? Demo, etc. And then this is more like things like text fields, right? And buttons. Am I this is all making sense, right? So it sounds like this is the framework for what we can do and prioritize. Does that validate in your brain?
Sure. I think it's fine.
Okay. Okay, so let me drive this home for us here. So we talked about what we just talked about was we talked about the problem already, right? The problem is that AI can help enliven this, can help create this kind of more asynchronous online automated program, right? Our goals, were painted through the goals of having that kind of XY axis of reading and actionable insights with these vertical program creation, program management, program delivery, program sponsorship, and just creating kind of solutions on all these ends. That's our goal, right? The people that we're making this for, like the users, it sounds like the users and audience of who this is for right now that we're focused on at least is participants mostly, right? I think we're scoping this to participants is what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, for
And
participants.
right. And I think maybe in the future, if people find ideas for program creators and program sponsors, we're very open to it. But right now, what we're talking about is mostly program participants, right? Which is a good scope because we do need a lot of help for them. And it sounds like the deliverable we're asking for, Eric, you tell me if I'm like, what is the deliverable? Can you just elaborate on that? What do we want delivered to us? If you were to simplify it down to like a one-liner, what is the deliverable we want from alumni team members that
Yeah. So,
that we need?
and yeah, so very, verbatim, it'd be like, this would be create a AI agent pipeline to help people get through our activities.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's ideally what we would be targeting, right?
Right. And we want this in the form of what? What's the form that we want it in? What's the format? What's the medium? What's the file? Or what's the what is being delivered to us specifically that
Yeah.
represents that?
So in this particular case, what we can, I guess it depends on how much you want to be able to link it to the platform. But to be honest, if they were to just create like a example in any language, I think Core AI, two most supported languages are Python and JavaScript. But the goal would be for them to create a pipeline that allows that, or they would just create they could create the pipeline that takes in the user input, takes in the program scope, and then creates those deliverables from that. So are you asking exactly like what tech stack they should be working on? So if you wanted it to be like directly translatable, they should probably build it in JavaScript. We could either have a place for them to put it directly into a repository, but I'd probably argue against that just because, so there's a lot going on. What they could do instead is we could probably try to include, let me see here. You can either do plain text or I was thinking about creating an endpoint for it, but now I think plain text works fine, to be honest. Like, so they can just take the program scope, they can mimic the user input, and then they can use structured output in order to say exactly what the AI should be outputting at any given time. So they don't actually need to be working on a repository. They can be working on their own repository, just working in JavaScript. That would work fine as well.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is, and where does Crew AI fold in as a tool? Are they actually using Crew AI? So they're the deliverable is a repository of code. It sounds like, right?
Yeah,
That
I
is
think they
built
would
on
create.
their own repo.
Yeah, I think they would create their own repository, and then we would look through that and try to see the pipelines that they created. So a Core AI pipeline can have access to multiple tools, and they can define those tools themselves. So, like, say, for example, if they wanted to create an integration that allows the AI to type into somebody's Google Doc, that's possible, and they would have to create the tools for that. And those would all exist in their repository.
So I guess so how does Crew AI doesn't fold into this, I'm assuming, as a tool then?
Core AI is a pipeline. So you would define the agents that I've been talking about using the Core AI helpers. And then you would do like Core AI.run or crew.run, I think is what it was, docs. Or you give it a task, you give it access to multiple agents, and then it creates an output.
So Crew AI is going to be part of the pipeline in the stack of what they'll be using.
Yeah, so Core AI is what I would be recommending. For simpler tasks, you can actually get away with using something like, directly calling an OpenAI API, for example, or using LinkedIn. But for anything that's super complex, I would probably recommend use Core AI just because it's simple. You can get a better feel for what you're doing if you're using Core AI because you can start getting outputs right away versus when you use LangChain or LangGraph, you have to read through a ton of documentation to understand what's going on. Core AI, it's like their quick start, I think, is like 5 snippets of code, and it's super easy to get started.
So just to be really clear, to kind of summarize it one more time for everyone, like what is a template example of what you expect delivered to us? Like what are the file names, I guess? What is the link that they're giving to us? If you're to kind of create like a template.
It's hard to think about that off the top of my head. If you
Because
want to,
it might depend on each activity, right?
if you wanted to, I could create a template repo that they could use, so they know exactly what to give to us. Do you want me to work on that?
I think that that would probably be wise that we do provide that template repo. I wonder how much time that's going to take from you, though. How much time do you think that'll take to make a template repo for this instance?
I don't know. Give me probably like 2 days. 2 days.
Right. So let's say this: what if alumni team members didn't have a template repo? how messy will that be for us to actually make it usable?
So what I would probably be doing is I'd be taking their pipeline and their agent definitions and converting that into, I guess, into our front end code. I mean, I think we would be able to figure it out. You said there's like 6 alumni, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
initially there might be more in the future, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
So I think that's a scale that's fine for this.
because I guess like I think a template repo, I'm not, I think I'm okay with them doing it on their own repo with their own kind of structure and all that stuff. I worry that maybe they do need a repo just to get started and know what they're being expected of them, right?
Okay. I mean, yeah, if you want, I can spend like a day or two working on creating a repo for them, a template repo.
How about this? How about this? We will include a repo link in the research links of our program, okay, for this, and we will develop that for people.
Okay.
Okay, let's make a template repo for them. We'll add a template repo link for people to use. Okay,
I'll go
and I'll
ahead
give
and add
people
this.
an example. And Eric, I think that like our program starts on the 23rd on the Monday, and depending on when they're watching this, it'll be there already. But we will provide that as soon as we can, basically, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah,
we'll be in
it'll
touch with them.
probably take me a few days to set that up and make
Yeah, I
sure it's
think that's
working.
actually no rush in this case because they can just start brainstorming initially, anyways. So, anyways, for the people who are listening, we'll provide a template repo in the research links, okay, that you can take a look at as an example. Great. Okay. So I think we pretty much covered everything. Can you do me a favor or just recap what you're expecting here and what you encourage as tips and tricks and recommendations for the alumni team members to do this scope that we're talking about? Just
Yeah,
recap it
sure.
for us.
So I know that people have varying backgrounds when it comes to working with AI. When you first get started, it can be kind of daunting, especially when you're using like big libraries that have a lot of documentation. I originally had that issue when I was working through LangGraph and LangChain, especially since AI is a constantly evolving field with tools that are constantly changing. So I'm recommending the use for AI just because you can get started in like 5 lines of code. So use it, try to grab your bearings, and as you continue to use it, you can start getting into really complex pipelines, and you can start learning about like different types of you can start working with different types of agent hierarchy methods. So like there's different ways to organize agents. So like one is working as a boss for the other, or you can have them work collaboratively together, and you can create multiple pipelines. So like feed different query pipelines into other query pipelines. So it can get really complex, but really just start off with something simple and just try to get it working and try to understand like really what's going on so that you can start building things that are more complex as you keep going. Yeah. Overall, though, there are lots of new tools that are coming out, and you can really do pretty much like whatever you want with these tools. Whether it's working with other integrations, like working off of like I said before with Google Docs, creating Discord integrations, and messages in the channel. There's a ton of things you can do.
So what I just thought of actually is we'll also put into the research links in addition to the template repo, right? Is I think there's also some research links that you'd probably recommend to them, Eric, like the one you sent me around the different multi-agent kind of hierarchies.
Yeah.
I think that's one you probably want to give, right? I think I actually have that saved already. So multi-agent kind of hierarchy. Is there other documents that you shared with me that you would want them to have or even ones
Yeah.
that you
So
don't?
the cool thing with Crei is it helps you to set up those hierarchies really, really simply. What I sent you was how those were set, essentially like the research docs. Like I believe that links to research papers on how it works and how it's useful, but that's actually linked inside of LangGraph docs. So LangGraph gives you a lot more, specialized control. So you would set up the hierarchy yourself, and you would set up like the loops yourself rather than in Crei it just gives you like, do you want this to be this hierarchy or do you want this to be this hierarchy? So it's a lot easier to use in Crei. But yeah, you can definitely include that if they wanted to get familiar with research papers.
Okay. So great. So I think we'll provide some of those documents that I think I can try to just find myself, or I can ask you that are relevant into the research links that I've bookmarked that you've shared with me over the last 6 months, right?
Sure.
I'll throw some of those in there. I'll throw QAI in there and a few others. So let me cap it here. I kind of asked this question to a lot of our employers. How would you define what a software engineer is at this point in time? What do you think you are aspiring to be as a software engineer at this point, given this world of advancing technologies, right? This kind of flip of the platform for coders now, which, AKA is probably AI, right? Like, how would you define like where you want to be as a software engineer that probably a lot of software engineers want to be at this point? How would you define that role at this point for yourself and for others and what you're aspiring to be at this point?
Yeah, so software engineers now are less coders; they're more architects. Does that make sense? Because coding is done simply now if you have agents. But the thing is, we talked about this before. Agents don't always know what they're doing, so you need to have a strong understanding of what you're building and how you want to build it before even going into it. So, like, you really need to have that strong foundational layer in order to, I think, get anywhere going forward, especially with how things are being automated. I think that works for most roles, right? Anything that could be automated, you want to be able to do what the AI can't. And in this case, it's figuring out architecture, figuring out how things are going to work, and figuring out doing research. Like, those are all things that AI is not going to be able to do anytime soon. So it's probably where I'm going to be. It's where I've been moving towards anyway.
Great. Awesome. I also just thought of we should probably make a required tool for this project to use Cursor if you're not using Cursor already, I would assume.
Sure, if you want to. That is a paid thing though, so make sure you would have
That's
to
true.
sponsor that.
That's true. Cool. And we'll use our, sponsor platform, of course. Cool. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate you going way more than you probably expected. And I think this actually takes care of it as training for alumni team members to do some AI R&D with us. Thank you.
Okay, great.